Well, Rob, I think another quarterback did something far worse than what Drew Brees said. And he's not on Drew Brees' level, but Jake Fromm, rookie quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, he got outed. I guess he was in a text conversation with a female friend.
It must be a scorned female. You better be careful because she dropped dime. Well, now it's not dime anymore. She dropped quarter. You know what I mean?
Right. So anyway, he had written her in a tweet in 2019, just a year ago. But this is a quote from him. They were talking about guns and all this because obviously that's been a big conversation in America. Gun control and so on and so forth. And he writes, but no guns are good. They need to let me get suppressors. Just make them very expensive so only elite white people can get them. Ha ha. And then I guess later on in the text, he said, I'm not an elite white person. Well, he may not have been in 2019, but he knew he was going to get drafted in the NFL, which he just did, and he would soon be a quote-unquote elite white person. And here's the rub, Rob. He released a statement today, and here's what he said. I'm just going to read the first part. I am extremely sorry that I chose to use the words elite white people in a text message conversation. Although I never meant to imply that I am an elite white person, as stated later in the conversation. There's no excuse for that word choice and sentiment. Rob, that's not that's not the problem. I mean, that's wrong. But the issue is that you are saying, whether you think you're elite or not, you're saying white people should have certain privileges that others should not.
Spot on. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to use white. You would just say elite.
Right.
That's the difference. Do you know what I mean, Chris?
Yep.
You could say the elite people or whatever, but that's not what you said. The white elite people.
Yep.
And I think that's where you talk about race and your feelings towards somebody else. And I agree. I think it's a really bad look. If I'm Buffalo or I'm some teammate of his, again, people will expose themselves, and we see this time and time again. If you give them enough rope or, you give them enough leeway, Chris, at some point, they'll expose themselves, and I think he did.
He certainly did. And look, because Rob, the history of this country, we know the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms and all that. America as a whole, well, I know there's some liberals now that care, but for the most part, America hasn't had a problem with whites owning guns. 48% of white households have a gun in them. They care when black people own guns. Only 24% of black households have guns in them. 36% of white males own guns, or whites own guns, 24% of blacks. And you see these militias in different parts of the country, a lot of times rural parts of the country, that have all these guns. They don't like it when blacks in the inner city have guns. When the Black Panthers just exercise their constitutional rights, we can bear arms. Because we see blacks getting brutalized by the police in Oakland. And our rights are to bear arms. They got destroyed. Where are all the gun buybacks at? In the hood. You ever seen one out in the suburbs?
Never. And here's the other one, Chris. Do you remember at the Michigan State House?
Yes.
Up in Lansing.
Just a
where
few weeks
people
ago.
showed up with rifles and whatnot to the State House because they were mad at the governor because she hadn't opened up the state of Michigan yet because of the coronavirus. Imagine groups of black people armed showing up to the State House at the same time, Chris. And what would have transpired on the steps of the State House?
I shudder to think.
Yes.
I shudder to think. And this is an issue. And what Fromm said, I don't even know if he knows. I think he knows what he said. Because there are some people preparing for a race war arming themselves to the T. It's not black people. There are whites preparing for it and arming themselves. We that's a fact. Go on the internet and look at it. Look at the militias. I was in Idaho with a friend of mine, Christian friend of mine, white guy.
Really?
Yes.
Idaho.
This was years ago. Yep.
I've been to my own private Idaho, but I've never been to Idaho. Go ahead.
I don't have a gun. We're talking. My man lives in a gated community. Boise's 2% black. Gated community. There's virtually no crime in Boise. And he's got like a couple assault rifles. He's got like 4 guns. And I'm like, dude, what you need all these guns for? And there's a lot of that's a part of certain white male culture. And so what Jake Fromm was saying was playing right into the hands of that, and saying white males can have guns, but nobody else should. Why? So they can be in control? So that's my issue with what Jake Fromm said. He needs to come a lot stronger than he did in his little apology, and
hopefully his teammates will hold him accountable, Chris, because
right.
I think they've heard the quote and seen the text message, and I think that'll be different.
Now bring in the closer.
Strike 1. Strike 2. Strike 3.
Here's why MLB is better than the NFL or NBA, and it isn't even close.
The reason baseball is better than the NFL and NBA is clear, especially when you talk about race. It's hard to deny baseball's place in American history and Jackie Robinson. The other sports, especially, when you talk about the NFL and what's happened, how in the world could you not think that the NFL was the league that shunned Colin Kaepernick for kneeling in a peaceful protest? They took his livelihood. They took his job. They ridiculed him. They ostracized him. He was right. He was telling us 4 years ago, 2016, about the plight of the black man at the hands of white police, and they didn't hear him. Even the NBA, which has done a lot of good things as far as diversity and the treatment of African-American players, even they have on the books, and people don't talk about it, they have on the books where players can't protest during the national anthem. It's un-American. It should be stricken from their CBA. Shame on NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. Shame on the NBA players for allowing that to continue to happen. That should be removed from their CBA.
That's it?
That's it. Don't forget, Inside the Parker drops every Thursday on the Herd Podcast Network. And we're even though the season hasn't started, Chris, we're back in action and there every week for you. So make sure you listen, rate, and subscribe.
I'm going to challenge you on this, Rob. I think using your own words. Major League Baseball now is 6% African American. And I think a big part of that is that African Americans simply aren't playing baseball very much anymore. But you have said, and others have said, I think Gary Sheffield has said this, it's not that. It is that, or it's not even, that's not a huge factor. The factor is that Major League Baseball is going and getting these players from Latin America because it's so much cheaper to get them than it is to get American players and some of these black American players.
I've said that, and that is true, Chris, but it's not just black players. It's white players. They don't want to deal with agents and pay bonuses up front. They've paid players big bonuses who wound up being flops. So, yes, the reason we see more brown people.
In that at all?
Yeah, it's economics. It's more about the economics. You don't have to pay the players from Latin America the big money up front like you have to pay Americans.
Right.
And that is the big reason. So I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, so I would say I ain't putting baseball on no pedestal.